Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Thank you. No,
Kia ora everyone. My name's Simon Everett. I'm the Interim Chief Executive of the Bay Plenty District Health Board. I'd like to introduce two of our clinical leads who were working on the day of this tragic event in our emergency department. David Van Dyke is one of our hospital coordinators and Dr Heike Hundema is a clinical lead for Whakatane Hospital. Both will be providing a media statement, and at this stage we'd ask that we don't ask so many questions at this stage.
Kia ora everyone. My name is Dr Heike Hundema. I'm the medical leader of Whakatane Hospital and consultant anaesthetist. We first got a call from police as well as multiple calls from our local contacts. We are a small, tight community. Like all hospitals, our teams hold mass casualty training exercises. We had one just recently in our emergency department involving juniors and senior doctors, nurses as well as St. John's. But what we are faced with on Monday was beyond comprehension. We activated our mass casualty plan, which means staff from across the hospital made their way as fast as possible to our emergency department. and also triggered a wider response for additional staff to get there from across the bay. Normally, on a typical day in our emergency department, we would have about 6 nurses and 2 doctors on duty. On Monday, once we knew the extent and severity of the casualties, I think there would have been about 100 staff in our emergency department, acute care unit and theatres. We used every single bed space, every resource we had to care for those people. To put this in perspective, if we saw one patient with the severity of burns that we treated that day, this would have been a significant event for our small hospital and would have activated our trauma team. Monday is beyond anything we would have anticipated. I've worked in major centres in Germany as well as in New Zealand. I've never seen this number of critically injured patients coming into an emergency department in a short space of time. Our staff are deeply impacted by what they saw. We are a tight team in a small community. Some of those people who have lost their lives were known to our staff. It was important to me to give some comfort to every patient I treated that day. I told them they were in good hands with a professional team. We are professionals and compassionate people. Those patients we treated and comforted will forever stay in our minds. Our thoughts are with them. We feel for them, their families and friends. Thank you.
Kia ora, everybody. My name is David Van Dyke. I'm the Whakatane Hospital Coordinator, a position I share with my colleague Julie Chapman. I've been a registered nurse for the last 22 years, and for many of those years I've worked in emergency departments both in New Zealand and in the UK. What I experienced 3 days ago was devastating. At the heart of our hospital are our people. They all rose to the needs of our community and worked beyond what anyone would expect of them. The entire hospital was involved in responding to the tragic event that we were faced with. As well as the doctors and nurses, we had occupational therapists, physiotherapists, social workers, healthcare assistants, podiatry, radiographers, our regional Māori health. We had staff from the public health, staff from stores, our kitchens, and our labs and our pharmacists, our admin staff, our orderlies and security, our facilities and engineers, our cleaners and volunteers, who all came together to do what they could. It was all hands on deck. We're extremely grateful for the support we received from the GPs and the health professionals in our community. When they heard what had happened, they came to the hospital with their skills and knowledge and were ready to help wherever they could. I want to acknowledge the support we've received from colleagues in DHBs all over the country. Your kindness and generosity has meant a lot to us at this time. I couldn't be more proud of how our hospital and wider community came together to do what we could for those people. As Heike has said, the compassion shown by our team when faced with this catastrophe was always there and still is. For many of us, it feels surreal. Everyone deals with tragic events in their own way, and many of us are still coming to terms with what happened. Our thoughts are with the victims who remain in hospital, those that sadly didn't survive, and their families and their friends. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, David Clark, Minister of Health. I'm here today along with my colleague Stuart Nash and Kiritapu Allen to acknowledge the work that locals have done, the support they've provided, the compassionate and professional care they have provided to everyone involved in this tragedy. I've had the opportunity to go through the hospital today to meet with staff and hear from them how this has affected them and how events unfolded on the day. through the emergency department, the ACU, and through wider parts of the hospital. And what's absolutely clear to me is that as New Zealanders, we should be incredibly proud of how our health system has responded in the face of a tragedy the size of which no one could have anticipated. The fact that they have a mass casualty plan in place and had been going through exercises recently was very helpful. The fact that the people here are professional, that they are used to situations where their job is to resuscitate and stabilise, meant that they had the professional care and skills to do what was needed to be done. And I guess in a way we're fortunate that there was such a highly qualified staff so close to where the events happened and able to respond so immediately to the tragedy and to the very poor condition that many who were suffering were in. I do want to also acknowledge and thank the Australian Health Service. The Office of Help and Support have been tremendous. Obviously, the New Zealand health system has responded incredibly well, and whilst we haven't needed to call upon much in that regard, it's just the way our countries work together, and I do want to thank them for that, and also acknowledge that they are also going to provide some ongoing care closer to home for those patients where it is appropriate. I would ask, before I take questions, that we focus first on questions related to the health system response here. My colleague Stuart Nash is here on the ground and will be able to answer wider questions. And I want to thank also the staff who have been prepared to give a statement. Obviously, this is not something they do every day. They are healthcare professionals, and I ask that all of you as media and that us as people in New Zealand give them the space they need now to process the tragedy that they have experienced. They worked quickly, they worked calmly. I've had descriptions of what they did, and I couldn't be more proud of the response, but I think we can all acknowledge that it will take some time for them now as they work through with family and friends in the community the events that have unfolded, and take time to care for themselves as well. So I ask that we all respect that and give them the space that they need. Open to questions. I think just the extent of the burns. I've heard people here who have experienced much more broadly from other hospitals talking about the number of people with extensive burns, and that this is just not something you see even in a large hospital in any normal situation.
Was there other injuries sustained, like lung damage as well from the gases?
A lot of the injuries sustained, as I understand it, were internal. I should also just mention now that there is a press conference this afternoon at 3:30 scheduled in Wellington, where the operational leads on the response from health and police, GNS and others, will be answering questions. I'm happy to answer that one, but if there are questions that are of a highly technical nature, it's probably better that the operational leads respond.
Given the extent of the wounds that you talked about, Minister, how worried are you that the number of fatalities is going to increase?
Oh, look, I think all of us are hoping for the best outcome in each individual situation. I think the actual clinical nature of the injuries is something that is a conversation in the first instance between the families and the clinicians, and it's not something that I want to speak to.
What's the latest?
Sorry.
How actively was it going to support your healthcare professionals through this time?
We will support our health professionals in terms of responding to requests that we get as they come through. I've had a good conversation with the Chief Executive, Simon, from the hospital here this morning. Of course, the staff now are on shift again. They're talking to each other, they're processing things, and I think whilst some of the support they'll need will be obvious now, some of it will become clear over time.
What's the latest in terms of the capacity of the burns units across the country, and are other surgeries, procedures, skin grafts for other patients that they being cancelled and postponed for priority to the victims of this eruption?
I think the system as a whole has responded incredibly well, and so we've had the capacity there to support the situation, but there's no doubt that 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 capacity has been stretched. People have stepped up, and we've had the skin here necessary for the first round of operations, and obviously more on the way. That's been expressed through the media. So I also want to thank the clinicians, the nurses, the allied health workers, and all involved in those ongoing responses, because it's not just today, this is ongoing, and the demands on those staff over coming time will continue to be strong.
Will the New Zealand government cover the cost of care for a lot of
The New Zealand government has a system of making sure that emergency care is there and provided. The detail of anything beyond that is left with Foreign Affairs, but we're a country that likes to make sure that we are looking after people.
Can we just talk a little bit about the supply of the skin? Is that all coming from the United States?
My understanding is that the majority is coming from the United States, but I think that's an operational matter best directed to the Director General of Health.
How many patients are still here?
In Whakatane, there are no patients from the immediate tragedy. They have been transferred to, the job here was to resuscitate and stabilise. That is the specialty here, and as I said before, we're fortunate that there was a group of experts so close to the incident, able and professionally able to do that work that needed to be done in order to transfer to where the next stage of care could be best delivered.
Are those people that initially responded being given time off now? How many of those medical professionals have taken
The reality is that many of them are still here working, and of course, because it's a small, tight-knit community, they are sharing their experiences with their fellow staff, working through the situations that have occurred, and I know that the management are looking carefully to make sure they're supporting staff, and where appropriate, making sure that they can have time that they need to recover and to get the support that they need.
Could you please comment on how the skin grafts will help those victims here?
I can't really. I'm not a clinical expert in terms of how skin grafts work, but I know that the processes that are being followed are the ones you would expect in the circumstance, and they're being dealt with now in specialist trauma centres. Okay. I'll stay here if there are any other related questions, but my colleague Stuart Nash.
Any questions for Myrtle?
Did you make an apology to the families this morning that you spoke with about the way that the police response has been handled with the families over the last couple of days?
What I did is I acknowledged that perhaps the communication between Command Headquarters and the families had not been as good as it could have been, and myself and Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement agreed to put a process in place to rectify that.
What is that process?
We would keep the families updated on any new announcements coming through, and we would brief them on operational details, and we would also contact them when we believed they felt that there were operations that they needed to be kept aware of.
How disappointed are you with how it's been handled over the last 48 hours?
Oh no, look, I think that the police and the first responders have done an amazing job on the ground in very, very trying situations. I mean, you heard Dr. Clark talk about the state of the patients that came in. I think everyone has done a fantastic job. But now we're moving to a different phase. That's why we've got Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement down here running operations. And you can be absolutely assured that the number one priority for the police service is to get the victims off the island and then victim identification. However, this must be done in a way that minimises the risk of further casualties.
I appreciate that some of the families are quite frustrated that it's taking days for the rescuers to get in. I'm sure you've heard that, but what do you say to families who are saying that the police are just too slow getting there and they're missing a window to recover those bodies from the island?
Look, I absolutely understand their frustration. Of that there is no doubt. However, police are not prepared to send their men and women into a situation without understanding the risks and then putting processes in place to mitigate those risks. So we are communicating with the families, but I understand their frustration. But please, the police are professionals at doing this. They are taking the advice from scientists. You know, we have heard that there are poisonous gases on the ground. We have heard that the odds of the volcano erupting again are high. So when planning an operation to remove the victims, we absolutely need to take into account all those risks before men and women are sent over there to.
Would an eruption make it impossible for you to go?
Would
If an eruption happens, wouldn't it be impossible then for you to recover those bodies?
It's very, very difficult to say because it depends on a whole lot of variables like the size, the scale of the eruption, the wind, a whole lot of variables that at this point in time we just can't predict.
What was the time of the meeting?
What was the outcome today when you decided that you can treat the population today?
As Dr. Clark mentioned, there is a meeting at 3:30. I think you'll get a much fuller briefing on that.
What was the
At midday? Yeah, I think you're better off asking Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement on that.
Are there any
What was
plans?
the time of the meeting at the Marae today with the families? Can you speak to us about the time inside the Marae?
There were two meetings. First of all, there was the local, the 10 o'clock karakia that has been happening since Tuesday, I understand, and that was respectful. Deputy Commissioner Wally Homaha spoke. Steph O'Sullivan from the council spoke, I spoke, Ngāti Awa spoke, and then afterwards we had a meeting just with one of the families, and it's fair to say that was a free and frank and honest conversation that needed to be had.
Are there any plans to take the families closer to White Island, either on one of the defence assets or anything like that at this point?
Yeah, not at this stage. There are exclusion zones in place for a reason, and that is to keep people safe. But what we have said we will do is keep the families updated and briefed as to what police are doing and planning.
If they requested you to take them this close and secret to the exclusion zone, would you do that?
I certainly haven't received that request, and that is not a decision that I would make. That is a decision for Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement.
Has the government and the police been engaging with neighbouring iwi, not just Ngāti Awa, so that they've got a strong connection with the rally as well?
Yes, according to Kiritapu Allen, who's one of our local MPs, and I must admit Kitty has been on the ground since the beginning, and she has done a fantastic job of liaising on behalf of the government, but yes, they have been liaising with other iwi apart from Ngāti Awa.
How many families from overseas are here in Pakistan?
Sorry, I can't answer that question.
What role will they play, the iwi, the neighbouring iwi, in the previous?
Well, what I can tell you about Ngāti Awa is we are very clear that they have a very important role to play in this whole process. And, you know, there was a suggestion that perhaps we weren't taking their role seriously. Well, I can assure you that Deputy Commissioner Wally Homaha is doing an absolutely fantastic role of being the liaison between Ngāti Awa and police operations. And, you know, Wally did a fantastic job down in Christchurch after March the 15th. And Wally and I were talking and saying, it's unbelievable that he is in the same situation before the end of the year, liaising with families about another tragedy. But he is doing a magnificent job.
So why are the cultural imperatives important to be upheld in these conferences?
I mean, Ngāti Awa are this is incredibly important. Ngāti Awa brothers and sons are over on that island. We need to treat them with respect. We need to understand that the kitanga is in place. We need to ensure that protocol is followed. Their brothers are over there.
What is your sense of how the families Ngāti Awa and obviously come around the families, those victims' families? What is your sense of how the victims are responding to that part of being cared for, I suppose, by the iwi?
Well, Ngāti Awa again reiterated today that the victims' families are now part of them, and this comes with obligations. And Leonie reiterated that one of those obligations is for Ngāti Awa to wrap a level of support around the victims' families that only Ngāti Awa can. And I am incredibly thankful for the support that Ngāti Awa have provided. Leonie did say, with those obligations, they are twofold. So if you're going to have a cup of tea, do your dishes.
Have you talked to the families about what will happen when bodies are recovered? Will they be sent to Auckland? What's the reaction to it?
Look, that's a conversation that I think is best had between yourselves and Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement.
Given this is the second mass fatality incident in this year, why has police failed to communicate well with family in the first few days of this incident? Because you had had lessons learned from Christchurch, the shooting, but then also the earthquake. Why are we in the same position now?
Well, first of all, two completely different instances. One involved an alleged terrorist shooting people, another involved a natural disaster. Police on the ground here are doing everything they possibly can to get those victims off the island. I want to stress that. That is their number one priority, and they are working incredibly hard to do that. Now, if the perception of the families is that the level of communication isn't what it should be, then we need to address that. Keep in mind that every family has been given a victim's advisor from the police. So police are working with the victims, the families of the victims, from day one. In fact, I think that my understanding is those victims advisors from police were down here on Monday. So police are wrapping a level of support around victims' families that they have always done. This is what police do. Now, you can imagine there is a degree of frustration. I mean, I can imagine that. But what we have decided is perhaps the level of communication needs to be just a little bit more robust to ensure that the victims' families are up to date the whole time with what is happening. And I buy into that. And that is why Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement and I have agreed that the communication with the families, the level of communication with the families will increase.
To your knowledge, is there any differing opinions on whether people should be rescued now or in obviously
Well, I'll go back to my original point, and that is that it is the police's priority to get the victims off Whakaari White Island. That is the number one priority. But I also want to reiterate, and I want to make this very clear, that police will not send over a victim identification team until they believe it is safe to do so. Now, we understand, and Deputy Commissioner Clement has talked about this, you can never eliminate risk. You can never eliminate risk. But if they understand the risks, then what they can do is put processes in place to mitigate the chances of anyone else being harmed in this.
making the final decision if the police commissioner hasn't been here? Who makes that final decision when they get the data from GNS about is it now time to go?
Well, Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement is in charge of operations on the ground now. Deputy Commissioner John Timms is in charge of operations in Wellington. But I would suggest it is probably Deputy Commissioner John Timms, but with advice from Deputy Commissioner Mike Clement. My understanding is when the Commissioner is back, then that will be his responsibility. Are there any more questions? Or
Has the death toll risen in the last 4 hours?
not that I am aware of. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.